So I had just arrived back in Whiterun after a thrilling battle with a mine full of bandits and wiping out several local wolf packs, my backpack overflowing with iron ore and pelts, when it hit me like an arrow to the you-know-what. The fun part of crafting isn't the 50-plus iron daggers I'm about to crank out to get me one step closer to my awesome Daedric armor. It was getting the raw materials to begin with. That's right. The secret to a good crafting system is a good gathering system. With this fact in mind, can we make your next crafting adventure in Pathfinder 1E better? Indeed we can, by considering how to implement trophies, trade goods, and gathering. Let's start by looking at trade goods. Trade goods are basically a more elaborate way of having your players pay the gold cost of the items they're about to craft. Trade goods are an exception to the 1/2 price for sold items rule and can be traded like currency. In the case of ore, the percentage of pure metal can vary widely, but a good rule of thumb is about 25% metal. As an example, gold costs 50 GP per pound. So ore would go for about 12 gold, 5 silver per pound. However, to factor in the cost of smelting, you might consider 6 to 9 gold pieces as a more fair price. Trade goods can be a great opportunity for world building, changing the price of certain items based on location. As an example, a large cosmopolitan port might have a wide selection of exotic goods, but a small mining town might have cheap ore, but expensive everything else. Also, needed goods might require a trip to a different, larger settlement. Now let's tackle magic items and trade goods. Justifying the higher price of magical items in a trade goods system might require some work, but there are definitely possibilities based on where you've decided to set your campaign. Number 1. Magical substances. Some examples include residuum from Faerun, lyrium from Dragon Age, spice from Dune, or dust from Ruby. Whatever you end up going with, just pricing the stuff the same as gold should work. You might also consider ritual components. For dark fantasy settings, creating magic items might require macabre and exotic materials, such as ground-up dragon bones, incense made from the sap of the Tree of Living Death, blood sacrifices, a choir of chanting cultists, and lots of candles. Finally, gemstones. Shiny rocks aren't just great treasure, they're also a possible material component for magic items. Whether used as decoration, ground up and used for rune etching, or just as a payment for a dragon's magic fire breath to smelt a sword, gemstones have a lot of possibilities as magical trade goods. And do remember, gems come in 2 different qualities, worked and unworked. Unworked gems are worth only half the value of worked gems. An unworked gem can be improved with a craft jewelry check. Let's move on to the truest version of a gathering system, gathering. This is where your players use skill checks to gather raw materials for crafting from the world around them. This category can be subdivided into 2 categories: foraging and salvaging. First up, foraging. The environment can be foraged for valuable resources, such as alchemical supplies, material components, repair materials, improvised tools, improvised weapons, and most importantly for your crafting players, herbs. Whatever other features the terrain might have, it will fall into one of 3 different types: barren, standard, or abundant. This will determine the DC requirement and the amount of time players will need to forage. Also, as you can see by this table, there's an additional terrain possibility: rugged. Rugged terrain is a difficulty multiplier, increasing the time spent foraging and the DC. Alchemical supplies, material components, repair materials, improvised tools, and weapons can be useful for your players, but gold prices being so negligible compared to the cost of crafting, it's not really worth it. The real value in foraging are herbs. Players who put points into the herbalism profession have potential access to a wide variety of valuable plants that can find their way into poisons, potions, and other consumables. Here are 2 examples of different herbs and how valuable and challenging they are to find. Winterbite. This has a gather DC of 11. It has a yield of 1 D4 doses and a shop selling price of 20 gold pieces. At the high end of the spectrum is Dream Lichen. This has a gathering DC of 30, a yield of 1 dose, and a shop selling price for 2,000 gold pieces. You can gather herbs when traveling or as an 8-hour activity. Gathering on the go doubles your travel time, and a dedicated activity grants 1 extra yield. Gathering herbs requires a survival or herbalism check. Preparing herbs, which makes them last for 1 month instead of 1 day, as well as making them useful items in their own right, requires an alchemy or herbalism check. Now, let's move on to salvaging. By making a craft or spellcraft check, you can break down items for valuable components. Your first option is raw crafting materials. Salvaging an item worth more than 1 gold piece takes 8 hours. The salvage DC is equal to the item's craft DC plus 5. The item is destroyed in the process and yields raw materials equal to 1/4 the item's cost. Failing the DC by 5 or more means the item is destroyed and no raw materials are salvaged. Next up, you could salvage raw magic item materials. If you have a magic item creation feat, such as Craft Wondrous Item, Craft Wand, or Craft Construct, you can salvage items of that same category for raw materials. Salvaging a magic item worth more than 500 gold pieces takes 8 hours. The salvage DC is equal to 10 plus the item's caster level. Salvaging an item gives you raw materials equal to 2/3 the item's creation cost. If you fail the check by 5 or more, the item is destroyed and no raw materials are salvaged. Also, spellbooks and formula books can be salvaged for magical inks and paper for new formula books, spellbooks, and scrolls. As the DM, you could consider giving your players broken items, burned out wands, rusted swords, and dented helmets as a reward for exploration. The players can then salvage these items for valuable crafting material. Alright, let's move on to our final category, trophies. These are some of the best crafting rewards because they integrate crafting and combat, one of the most frequently occurring events in any D&D game. Crafting a trophy requires 3 steps. Number 1, identification. This is where you use the appropriate knowledge skill to determine what part of a creature can serve as a trophy. This has a DC of 15 plus the creature's CR. Next, harvesting the trophy. This typically requires a survival or heal check equal to DC 15 plus the creature's CR. Finally, crafting the trophy. After harvesting the trophy, it will spoil or decay after 1 day. The spell Gentle Repose or similar magics extend this period. Your prize must be preserved with an appropriate craft skill, such as alchemy, jewelry, leather, or taxidermy, DC 15 plus the creature's CR. The value of trophies is determined by the creature's CR, and I would say this should impact the value of the trophy when used as a crafting material. Now let's look at the magical affinity of trophies. Preserving the magical essence of a trophy for use in crafting magic items is more difficult than preserving a trophy normally. It also requires different skills. The DC to craft a magical trophy is 20 plus the creature's CR. However, When used as a crafting material, the trophy is worth 20% more than its gold price. Here are some examples of magical trophies. A demon heart. This can be used in the creation of any item with a spell with the evil descriptor in its creation requirements. Crafting this trophy requires a knowledge planes. Ooze remnants can be used in any item that has a spell that does acid damage in its requirements. The trophy must be crafted with a knowledge dungeoneering skill check. Primeval creatures, such as dinosaurs, megafauna, and dire animals, can have trophies associated with them used in the creation of any magic item with bear's endurance, bull's strength, or cat's grace in its descriptor. Some examples of this are classics like the Belt of Giant Strength, the Belt of Incredible Dexterity, or the Belt of Mighty Constitution. This trophy must be crafted with a knowledge nature check. Next, Troll Liver. This can be used in any item that has a spell with the healing sub-school in its requirements. The trophy must be crafted with a knowledge local check. Finally, True Dragon Breath Organs. These can be used to craft any item that deals elemental damage of the type that is dealt by the dragon's breath attack. The trophy must be crafted with a knowledge arcane check. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to support my work outside of YouTube, check out Sorcerous, a dark fantasy mystery RPG available right now on Steam. Follow the link in the description to watch the trailer. And if you'd like to take your game further, consider joining the D6 Damage Discord. We have fantastic discussion groups for character creation, dungeon mastering, and much, much more.